The massive space station called Harmony's Edge floated in the darkness between three star systems, like a metal city built among the stars. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its countless ports, while beings of all shapes and sizes moved through its corridors. Today was special because the most important meeting in hundreds of years was about to begin. High Chancellor Vextar stood nearly 3 meters tall with dark green scales that gleamed under the station's lights. His yellow eyes looked down at the smaller species around him with obvious contempt. The other Saurian leaders flanked him on both sides, their massive forms making even the largest aliens seem small. They had ruled most of the galaxy for over 2 centuries, and saw no reason why that should ever change. Admiral Crixmel walked beside the High Chancellor, with his head held high and his clawed hands clasped behind his back. The red markings on his scales showed his military rank and his many victories in battle. He looked at the gathering delegates from other species and sneered at their weakness. The insect-like Chitauri scuttled nervously around the edges of the Great Hall, while the gaseous Natali floated in their environmental suits like living clouds. All of them showed proper respect to their Saurian superiors. The Great Council Chamber had been built to accommodate the Saurians and their impressive size. Massive chairs arranged in a circle could easily hold their 3-meter frames, while smaller species had to make do with whatever they could find. The ceilings stretched high, above them all decorated with holographic displays showing the extent of Saurian territory across the galaxy. Everything about the room was designed to remind visitors exactly who was in charge. Then the doors opened, and 3 humans walked in. Park Dae-ho led the small group with calm confidence, despite being barely half the height of the Saurian leaders. His simple black diplomatic uniform looked plain compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by the other delegates. Behind him walked Lee So-min in her military dress uniform, and Kim Min-ho carrying what appeared to be a simple folding chair. The 3 humans seemed impossibly small in the vast chamber built for giants. Conversation stopped as every eye turned to study these newcomers. The humans had only recently made contact with galactic civilization, and most species had never seen them before. They looked fragile and weak compared to the armored Chitauri or the towering Saurians. Their pale skins seemed soft, and their small frames looked like they might break if handled too roughly. High Chancellor Vextar looked down at Park Dae-ho with undisguised amusement. "So these are the famous humans we have heard so much about," he said in his deep, rumbling voice. "They are even smaller than the reports indicated." Admiral Crixmel laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Perhaps we should provide them with booster seats so they can reach the table." Several other Saurians joined in the laughter, while delegates from other species remained carefully silent. Park Dae-ho smiled politely and bowed slightly. "Thank you for allowing us to attend this gathering, High Chancellor. We are honored to be here." "The honor is entirely ours," Vextar replied with obvious sarcasm. "It is not often we get to meet such an interesting new species. Tell me, how many worlds do your people control?" "We currently inhabit 12 worlds in our local sector," Dae-ho answered honestly. More laughter echoed through the chamber. "That they're from. Saurian Empire controlled over 3,000 worlds, while even minor species typically held dozens. 12 worlds marked humanity as barely more than a local curiosity." 12 whole worlds, Crixmel said with mock amazement. "Truly impressive for such a young civilization. And how many ships comprise your mighty fleet?" Lee So-min stepped forward slightly. "Our fleet consists of 47 vessels of various classes, Admiral." The laughter grew louder. The Saurian Navy alone possessed over 10,000 warships, while their client species added thousands more. 47 ships would barely qualify as a patrol group in Saurian territory. High Chancellor Vexitar raised one clawed hand for silence. "Enough entertainment for now. Let us proceed to the business at hand." He gestured toward the massive chairs arranged in the council circle. "Please, take your seats so we may begin." Park Dae-ho looked at the enormous furniture designed for 3-meter tall reptiles. Even standing on the seat, his head would barely reach where a Saurian's chest would be. The chairs were clearly built to intimidate smaller species and make them feel insignificant. "High Chancellor," Deho said respectfully, "would it be possible to arrange seating more appropriate for human physiology? We would be honored to participate fully in these proceedings." The chamber fell completely silent. No one had ever requested changes to the council chamber before. The Saurians had built everything to their specifications, and other species simply adapted or remained standing. Vextar's yellow eyes narrowed as he stared down at the small human. "The council chamber has been arranged according to proper protocols, established centuries ago. If your species cannot adapt to civilized standards, then perhaps you should reconsider whether you belong here at all." Crixmel stepped closer, his massive form looming over Park Deho. "The strong make the rules while the weak follow them. This is the natural order of things throughout the galaxy. Your species will learn this lesson quickly or find themselves excluded from civilized society." Kim Min-ho quietly unfolded his simple chair and set it down behind Park Deho. The human diplomat sat down calmly while the Saurians watched with growing irritation. The small folding chair looked absurdly out of place among the massive stone-like furniture surrounding it. "We understand the natural order quite well," Deho said from his modest seat. "We have observed it carefully since making contact with galactic civilization. The strong do indeed make the rules and enforce them upon the weak. This is why we requested this meeting." "You requested this meeting?" Vextar's voice carried dangerous undertones. "The Galactic Council decides when and where such gatherings occur. New species do not make demands of their betters." "Of course not, High Chancellor. We merely expressed our desire to discuss humanity's place in the galactic community. The Council, in its wisdom, chose to grant us this opportunity." Several Chitauri delegates began clicking nervously while the Nathali's gas cloud swirled faster inside their containment suits. Everyone could feel the tension building as the Saurians grew more agitated with each exchange. Admiral Crixmel's claws extended slightly as he spoke. "Your place in the galactic community is quite simple, human. You will serve as a client species under Saurian protection. Your 12 little worlds will provide resources and labor while we ensure your continued existence. This arrangement has worked well for dozens of species over the centuries. And if we prefer a different arrangement?" Lee So-min asked quietly. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. No species had ever openly questioned Saurian authority in the council chamber before. Client status was considered generous for such a weak and primitive civilization. High Chancellor Vextar rose to his full imposing height, his scales darkening with anger. "There are no other arrangements, human. You will accept client status or face the consequences of defying the natural order. We have been patient with your ignorance thus far, but our patience has limits." Park Deho remained seated in his small chair, apparently unimpressed by the display of intimidation. "We appreciate your patience, High Chancellor. Perhaps we could discuss the specific terms of this client relationship? We would like to understand exactly what would be expected of us." "What would be expected is complete obedience," Crixmel snarled. "Your species will provide what we require when we require it. Your ships will serve alongside ours when called upon. Your worlds will house Saurian administrators who will ensure compliance with our directives. In return, we will protect you from the many dangers that threaten weak species in this galaxy." "And in matters of galactic policy?" Deho asked. "Would humanity have any voice in decisions that affect us?" Vextar laughed coldly. "Client species do not participate in policy decisions. They implement the policies decided by their superiors. This is how civilization functions throughout the galaxy." Kim Min-ho had been quietly adjusting something on his folding chair throughout the conversation. Now he looked up with innocent curiosity. "The station's artificial gravity seems calibrated specifically for Saurian physiology," he observed. "Very impressive engineering. How do you manage to accommodate so many different species with such varying environmental needs?" A Chitauri engineer named Tikval clicked excitedly. "Oh, the gravity generators use harmonic resonance fields to create localized zones of different intensities. Each species gets their optimal environment within their designated areas." "Fascinating," Kim Min-ho replied with genuine interest. And the power requirements for such a complex system must be enormous. The station uses quantum fusion cores with redundant safety protocols. Tikval continued, happy to discuss his specialty. Each core can power roughly 1/4 of the station's systems independently. High Chancellor Vextar slammed his clawed fist on the armrest of his massive chair. Enough technical discussion. We are here to determine the fate of the human species, not exchange engineering specifications. Park Dae-ho stood up from his simple folding chair. High Chancellor, we request a brief recess to consult with our government regarding the terms. The human delegation had barely left the council chamber when alarms began echoing through the station's corridors. Lee So-min touched the communication device in her ear and listened to the incoming reports with a neutral expression. Park Dae-ho and Kim Min-ho walked beside her as they made their way toward the docking bay where their shuttle waited. What are those alarms about? Kim Min-ho asked innocently as they passed groups of nervous alien civilians. A Nathali delegate floating nearby answered in its translated mechanical voice. New ships arriving in the system. The automated sensors always sound alerts when unknown vessels appear. Lee So-min nodded as if this information meant nothing special to her. Probably just more delegates arriving late to the proceedings, but she knew better because the ships now approaching Harmony's Edge belonged to Earth's colonial navy. Captain Nam Soo-jin commanded the small human fleet that had been waiting just outside sensor range until this moment. The timing was perfect because the Saurians would interpret their arrival as either reinforcement or desperation from a species facing impossible demands. High Chancellor Vextar stood in the station's command center watching the tactical displays. With growing amusement, 12 small human vessels had appeared at the edge of the system and were moving slowly toward the station. Compared to the massive Saurian dreadnoughts already positioned around Harmony's Edge, the human ships looked like children's toys. So the little humans brought their entire fleet, Admiral Kriegsmill observed with obvious contempt. How touching that they think 12 ships might intimidate us. War Marshal Texor studied the incoming vessels through the enhanced sensors. His massive frame was covered in battle scars from decades of conquest, and his red-marked scales indicated his high rank in the Saurian military hierarchy. Unlike some of his colleagues, he took potential threats seriously, regardless of their apparent size. The ships appear to be of primitive design, he reported to the High Chancellor. Basic fusion drives, standard metallic hulls, and weapon signatures that suggest kinetic projectile systems rather than energy weapons. Their largest vessel is barely 1/10 the mass of our smallest frigate. Vextar laughed deeply. Kinetic weapons and fusion drives. How wonderfully primitive. It reminds me of our own early spaceflight attempts centuries ago. The massive view screen showed the approaching human fleet in detail. The ships looked functional but unremarkable, with simple geometric designs and minimal external decorations. They moved in a loose formation that seemed almost casual compared to the precise military arrangements favored by more advanced civilizations. Admiral Kriegsmill activated his personal communicator. All Saurian vessels maintain position around the station. These primitive craft pose no threat but remain alert for any hostile actions. The response came back immediately from over 50 warships positioned throughout the system. Each Saurian dreadnought carried enough firepower to reduce a planet's surface to molten slag, while their shields could absorb the entire energy output of a small star. The human fleet approaching them would last approximately 3 minutes in actual combat. Meanwhile, Park Dae-ho had reached the human diplomatic quarters where secure communication equipment allowed him to speak directly with Earth. The conversation was brief and conducted in Korean to prevent easy translation by potential listeners. When it ended, he turned to his companions with a thoughtful expression. Our instructions remain unchanged, he told them quietly. We proceed according to plan. Kim Min-ho had connected his folding chair to a portable computer and was reviewing streams of data collected during their time in the council chamber. His innocent questions about the station's engineering systems had provided detailed information about power generation, life support, communication networks, and defensive capabilities. The Saurians built this station as a symbol of their dominance, he said while studying the technical specifications. Everything about it is designed to impress and intimidate visitors rather than maximize efficiency. Lee So-min was monitoring military communications from the approaching human fleet. Captain Nam Soo-jin reported that Saurian warships were maintaining defensive positions around the station, without showing immediate signs of aggression. The balance of power was so obviously in their favor that they felt no need for hostile gestures. 12. Ships against 50, she murmured. They probably think we're either incredibly brave or completely insane. Perhaps both, Park Dae-ho replied with a slight smile. The Saurians have grown accustomed to overwhelming superiority in every encounter. They cannot imagine how any species with such limited resources might pose a challenge. Back in the command center, War Marshal Thexor was receiving detailed reports about the human vessels from his intelligence officers. The analysis confirmed what visual observation had already suggested. These were primitive ships, built by a young civilization with limited technological capabilities. Their hull composition indicates basic steel alloys with minimal armor plating, reported Commander Sekhan. Energy signatures suggest they rely on chemical explosives and kinetic projectiles for weaponry. No evidence of plasma cannons, particle beams, or antimatter systems. What about their defensive capabilities? Thexor asked. Primitive deflector screens at best, possibly just basic electromagnetic barriers. Nothing that would stop our plasma weapons for more than a few seconds. High Chancellor Vextar had heard enough technical analysis. The important question is whether they intend to make some foolish gesture of defiance. How long until they reach the station? Approximately 2 hours at their current speed, the navigation officer replied. Excellent. That gives us time to prepare a suitable demonstration of Saurian power. Alert all ships to ready their weapon systems for a firing exercise. Admiral Cricksmell's eyes gleamed with anticipation. Shall we target the asteroids in the outer system? A few plasma barrages should provide an educational experience for our human visitors. An excellent suggestion. Select several large asteroids and reduce them to dust. Make sure the humans have a clear view of our capabilities. The orders went out immediately to the Saurian fleet. Within minutes, massive weapon systems that could crack continents were powering up and targeting rocky bodies throughout the system. The demonstration would serve two purposes: showing the humans exactly what they faced, while providing entertainment for Saurian crews who rarely had opportunities to fire their weapons. The first volley lit up space like a dozen miniature suns. Plasma beams that burned hotter than stellar cores lanced out from the Saurian dreadnoughts and struck their targets with devastating precision. Asteroids that had existed for billions of years vanished in seconds, reduced to glowing particles that dispersed quickly into the vacuum. Every ship in the system detected the massive energy discharges. The human fleet continued its approach without changing course or speed, apparently unimpressed by the display of destructive power. This reaction surprised some Saurian commanders who expected immediate surrender or desperate flight. Perhaps they did not understand what they just witnessed, suggested Commander Sekhan. War Marshal Thexor studied the tactical displays more carefully. Their sensors are primitive but functional. They know exactly what our weapons can do. Then why do they continue approaching? Admiral Cricksmell demanded. Any rational species would withdraw immediately after seeing such overwhelming force. Maybe. They are not rational, Vextar replied coldly. Some young species react to hopeless situations with desperate aggression rather than sensible surrender. We have encountered such foolishness before. The second demonstration was even more impressive than the first. Saurian gunners selected targets closer to the station, so the destructive effects would be clearly visible to anyone watching. Massive chunks of rock and metal that had been drifting peacefully through space were suddenly transformed into expanding clouds of superheated gas and debris. This time the human fleet did react. Their formation tightened slightly and their speed increased by a small margin. But they still showed no signs of turning away from what appeared to be certain destruction if they continued on their current course. Captain Nam Soo-jin watched the light show from her position on the bridge of the human flagship. The Saurian plasma weapons were indeed impressive and would easily destroy her small fleet if they chose to open fire. But impressive weapons were useless if they never hit their targets, and hitting targets required accurate information about enemy positions and movements. Status report, she requested from her tactical officer. Lieutenant Baek Soo-hyun checked his displays carefully. All ships maintaining formation and nominal operating parameters. The Saurian demonstration has provided excellent data on their weapon characteristics and firing patterns. Excellent. Continue monitoring their communications and tactical networks. I want to know everything about how they coordinate their fleet movements. Meanwhile, Engineer Park Tae-young was busy in the ship's sensor bay, collecting detailed information about Saurian technology. Their demonstration had revealed far more than they probably intended about power generation, targeting systems, and weapon cycling times. Every plasma discharge created electromagnetic signatures that could be analyzed and understood. Their weapons are powerful, but inefficient, he reported, to Captain Nam Soo-jin. The human delegation requested another recess, just as tensions in the council chamber reached their peak. High Chancellor Vextar granted it with obvious irritation, expecting the humans to return within the hour with complete surrender to Saurian demands. He had no idea that Park Dae-ho needed this break, for reasons that had nothing to do with fear or desperation. In their secure quarters, the three humans activated privacy screens and established encrypted communication with Earth. The conversation that followed would have terrified every species in the galaxy if they had been allowed to listen. Dr. Yang Ji-hoon appeared on the holographic display with an expression of grave concern that immediately caught everyone's attention. The archaeological data has been confirmed, he reported without preamble. Every analysis points to the same horrifying conclusion. Choi Jin-woo joined the transmission from Earth's intelligence headquarters. His normally calm demeanor showed cracks of worry as he began uploading classified files to the diplomatic team's secure systems. The information contained within those files would change everything they thought they knew about galactic civilization. We have been studying the ancient ruins found throughout human space, Choi Jin-woo explained while data streams filled their displays. What we initially thought were separate civilizations turns out to be evidence of something much larger and more terrifying. The holographic projections showed star maps covering thousands of light years around Earth's position. Red markers indicated the locations of dead worlds where once thriving civilizations had simply vanished without explanation. The pattern was unmistakable once someone knew how to look for it. Dr. Yang Ji-hoon highlighted specific archaeological sites as he continued his briefing. The ruins we have discovered represent dozens of different species, some far more advanced than any current galactic civilization. They possessed technology that makes even Saurian weapons look primitive by comparison. What happened to them? Lee So-min asked while studying the disturbing data. They were systematically destroyed by something the survivors called the Devourers. Yoon Hairi's voice joined the conversation from Earth's Xenoarchaeology Institute. Every species that left records describes the same phenomenon, something that consumes entire civilizations and leaves nothing behind but empty worlds. The holographic display shifted to show translated fragments of text recovered from dozens of different archaeological sites. Despite being written by completely different species separated by thousands of years, the messages were remarkably consistent in their desperate warnings about an approaching doom. They come from beyond the rim where no stars shine. Read 1. Fragment in the flowing script of a long-dead aquatic species. They devour light itself and leave only silence in their wake. Another message carved into crystal by beings who communicated through harmonic vibrations was equally chilling. The endless dark spreads across the galaxy, consuming everything that lives, thinks, or dreams. Park Dae-ho studied the evidence with growing understanding of why Earth's government had authorized such extreme measures for this diplomatic mission. How long ago did these extinctions occur? The most recent was approximately 800 years ago, Dr. Yang Ji-hoon replied, but the pattern extends back over 3,000 years with accelerating frequency. Something has been systematically destroying galactic civilization, and it appears to be getting closer. Choi Jin-woo activated additional displays showing current galactic territory controlled by surviving species. Look at the distribution of remaining civilizations. They are all clustered in this small region of space, hiding in the shadow of the galactic core. The pattern was obvious once pointed out. Every surviving species lived within a relatively tiny area compared to the vast galaxy around them. Beyond that zone of occupied worlds lay only empty systems and dead planets where ancient civilizations had once flourished. The Saurians and their client species represent the survivors, Yoon-Hai explained. They are not the strongest or most advanced civilizations in galactic history. They are simply the ones who learned to hide effectively enough to avoid detection. Kim Min-ho looked up from his portable chair where he had been processing the incoming data through his own analytical systems. This explains why their technology seems designed for intimidation rather than actual warfare. They have been fighting each other for centuries rather than facing real external threats. Exactly, Dr. Yang Ji-hoon confirmed. They have grown soft and complacent, hiding in their small corner of the galaxy. Meanwhile, the real danger continues to approach from beyond the galactic rim. Lee So-min accessed the latest intelligence reports from Earth's deep space monitoring stations. Our long-range sensors have detected massive gravitational anomalies moving through the outer darkness. Something huge is out there, and it appears to be heading in this direction. The implications were staggering. Every species in the galaxy believed they were living in a golden age of civilization and prosperity. In reality, they were the last survivors of a much larger and more advanced galactic community that had been systematically destroyed by something beyond their comprehension. The ancient warnings all mention the same characteristics, Yoon-Hai continued, while displaying more translated fragments. The Devourers do not simply conquer or enslave civilizations, they completely erase them from existence, consuming their technology, their culture, and their very essence. How much time do we have? Park Dae-ho asked the question that everyone dreaded. Choi Jin-woo consulted the latest projections from Earth's Strategic Analysis Department. Based on the movement patterns we have detected, the threat will reach the inhabited zone of the galaxy within 50 to 100 years, possibly sooner if they accelerate their approach. The human delegation sat in stunned silence as the full scope of the situation became clear. They had come to this diplomatic gathering expecting to negotiate humanity's place in galactic civilization. Instead, they had discovered that galactic civilization itself was doomed unless someone found a way to break the cycle of destruction that had claimed countless worlds. This is why Earth authorized the Revelation Protocol, Dr. Yang Ji-hoon said solemnly. Humanity may be the galaxy's last hope because we are approaching the situation from outside established patterns of thought and behavior. Kim Min-ho's portable chair had been busy analyzing data about every species present at the diplomatic gathering. His innocent questions during the council sessions had provided detailed information about their technological capabilities, military doctrines, and psychological profiles. The Saurians and their allies have optimized their entire civilization for dominance over weaker species, he reported after reviewing his analysis. Their weapons, tactics, and social structures are all designed for intimidating opponents rather than fighting genuine threats, which means they are completely unprepared for what is coming, Lee So-min concluded grimly. Their overwhelming firepower will be useless against enemies they cannot intimidate or understand. The holographic display shifted to show tactical projections based on current galactic military capabilities compared to the fragmentary records of civilizations that had faced the Devourers in the past. The results were not encouraging for conventional approaches to the problem. Every species that tried to fight using traditional military methods was destroyed, Yoon-Hai explained. Superior technology and massive fleets provided no protection against something that operates beyond normal physical constraints. Then how did any civilization survive at all? Park Dae-ho asked. Dr. Yang Ji-hoon highlighted a few archaeological sites that showed different patterns from the others. A handful of species survived by abandoning their advanced civilizations and reverting to primitive hiding strategies. They scattered to remote worlds, eliminated all traces of their technology, and waited in the darkness until the threat passed. The current galactic civilizations are descendants of those survivors, Choi Jin-woo added. They rebuilt slowly and carefully, always avoiding the attention of whatever destroyed their ancestors. This is why they remain clustered in such a small area and why their technology focuses on control rather than exploration. The implications. For current diplomatic negotiations were becoming clear. The Saurians and their client species were not evil conquerors seeking to dominate the galaxy. They were terrified survivors trying to maintain control over the only safe zone they had ever known. They do not understand what is coming, because they have forgotten the true history of their own civilizations, Kim Minho observed. All they remember are legends and warnings that they no longer take seriously. Lee So-min studied the strategic situation with her military training. If we reveal this information to the galactic leaders, will they believe us or dismiss it as human propaganda? Unknown, Choi Jin-woo admitted. The evidence is overwhelming, but it contradicts everything they have believed about their own superiority and the nature of galactic civilization. Park Dae-ho stood up and began pacing around their small quarters while considering the options available to them. The original plan had been to demonstrate human capabilities and demand equal treatment in galactic affairs. Now the stakes had become much higher than anyone had anticipated. The council chamber fell silent when the human delegation returned from their extended recess. High Chancellor Vextar expected immediate capitulation from these primitive beings who had surely realized the hopelessness of their situation. Instead, Park Dae-ho walked calmly to his simple folding chair and sat down with the same quiet confidence he had shown throughout the proceedings. "Have your people reached a decision regarding our generous offer of client status?" Vextar asked, with barely concealed impatience. Park Dae-ho looked around the great chamber at the assembled representatives from dozens of species before answering. "We have indeed reached a decision, High Chancellor. However, we would like to propose an alternative arrangement." Admiral Crixmel's claws extended slightly as his irritation grew. "There are no alternative arrangements. You will accept client status or be excluded from galactic civilization entirely. With respect, Admiral, we believe there should be a third option available," Park Dae-ho replied calmly. "A test of capabilities to determine whether humanity deserves equal status rather than subordination." The chamber erupted in shocked whispers and clicking sounds from various delegates. No species had ever challenged Saurian authority so directly, especially not one with such obviously limited military resources. War Marshal Thexor rose to his full imposing height and glared down at the small human diplomat. "You dare suggest that your primitive species should be considered equal to civilizations that have ruled the galaxy for centuries? We suggest only that capabilities should be tested rather than assumed," Lee So-min interjected smoothly. "Surely, the mighty Saurian military would have no difficulty proving their superiority over such a weak and primitive opponent." The psychological trap was perfectly set. Refusing the challenge would suggest weakness or fear, while accepting it seemed to guarantee an easy victory that would humiliate humanity before all galactic civilization. High Chancellor Vextar studied the three humans with growing suspicion. Their confidence made no sense given the overwhelming disadvantage they faced. Either they were completely delusional, or they possessed some capability that was not immediately obvious. "What form would this test take?" he asked carefully. Kim Minho looked up from his folding chair with an expression of innocent curiosity. "Perhaps a military exercise between our respective fleets? A simulated battle under controlled conditions to demonstrate relative capabilities." War Marshal Thexor laughed harshly. "Your 12 primitive vessels against our 50 advanced warships? The outcome would be so obvious that it hardly qualifies. As a test, then you should have no objection to accepting the challenge," Park Dae-ho observed. A quick demonstration of Saurian superiority, followed by humanity's grateful acceptance of client status. The logic was unassailable from the Saurian perspective. They possessed overwhelming advantages in numbers, technology, and experience, while the humans had nothing but desperate bravado. The exercise would serve as a perfect example to other species of what happened when anyone challenged established galactic order. "Very well," Vextar declared after consulting briefly with his military advisors. "We accept your challenge. A military exercise will be conducted in the outer system, where there is sufficient space for maneuvering." Admiral Crixmel activated his communication systems to contact the Saurian fleet. War Marshal Thexor will personally command our forces to ensure the demonstration is properly conducted. Your ships will be given the opportunity to surrender at any time to minimize casualties. Most generous, Park Dae-ho replied with a slight bow. We suggest neutral observers from other species to verify the results and ensure fair conduct on both sides. Several delegates immediately volunteered to observe the proceedings. The Chitauri were particularly excited about the opportunity to witness advanced military tactics, while the Nathali expressed scientific interest in comparative weapons technologies. Within 2 hours, both fleets had moved to the designated area near the system's outer gas giant. The Saurian formation was a masterpiece of military precision, with heavy dreadnoughts forming the center, while lighter vessels provided screening and support. Their weapons systems powered up with ominous energy signatures that could be detected. Throughout the system, the human fleet arranged itself in what appeared to be a simple defensive formation, with their largest vessels protecting the smaller ones. To experienced military observers, their positioning looked almost amateur compared to the sophisticated Saurian deployment. Captain Nam Soo-jin stood on the bridge of the human flagship, reviewing final preparations with her senior officers. Lieutenant Baek Soo-hyun had been monitoring Saurian communications for hours and reported that their opponents were treating this as little more than a training exercise. They are discussing betting pools on how quickly we will surrender, he reported with amusement. Most estimates range from 3 to 15 minutes. Engineer Park Tae-young had completed his analysis of Saurian weapons and defensive systems based on data collected during their earlier demonstration. Their plasma cannons are powerful but require significant charging time between shots. Their shield harmonics follow predictable patterns that can be exploited with properly timed kinetic impacts. Excellent, Captain Nam Soo-jin replied. All ships report ready for the exercise to begin. War Marshal Thexor commanded the Saurian fleet from his massive dreadnought with complete confidence in the outcome. His tactical officers had already calculated optimal firing solutions for eliminating the human vessels with minimal expenditure of ammunition. Begin the exercise, he ordered over general communications. All vessels are authorized to engage targets of opportunity. The Saurian fleet moved forward in perfect formation while their weapon systems reached full power. Plasma cannons that could melt through planetary crusts targeted the primitive human ships with deadly precision. The first volley would disable most enemy vessels, while follow-up shots would finish any survivors. But the human fleet had already begun moving before the Saurian weapons fired. Their ships scattered in seemingly random directions while accelerating, at rates that surprised their opponents. The careful firing solutions calculated by Saurian tactical computers suddenly became useless as their targets refused to remain in predictable positions. Evasive maneuvers detected, reported Commander Sekhan from his position at the Saurian tactical station, adjusting targeting solutions to compensate for enemy movement. The second Saurian volley was more carefully aimed, but again failed to achieve decisive results. The human ships moved with unexpected agility, constantly changing direction and speed in patterns that seemed almost impossible to predict. A few hits were scored, but the damage was minimal compared to what the weapons should have achieved. Their evasion patterns are more sophisticated than expected, Thexor observed with growing irritation. Focus fire on individual targets rather than attempting synchronized volleys. But focusing fire required the Saurian ships to break their perfect formation and adjust to tactics they had not practiced extensively. The human fleet immediately took advantage of this tactical shift by concentrating their own firepower on isolated Saurian vessels. The first human attack came as a complete shock to everyone watching. Instead of attempting to match Saurian energy weapons with their own primitive systems, the human ships fired clouds of small kinetic projectiles at specific points on enemy shields. The impacts created harmonic resonances that disrupted shield generators and allowed follow-up shots to penetrate defensive barriers. How did they know our shield frequencies? Demanded Commander Sekhan as his flagship shuddered under kinetic impacts. The answer was that Engineer Park Tae-young had analyzed every aspect of Saurian defensive technology during their earlier weapons demonstration. The seemingly random asteroid destruction had revealed detailed information about shield harmonics, power cycling, and vulnerable points in their defensive systems. More importantly, Kim Min-ho's innocent questions about station engineering had provided crucial intelligence about Saurian design philosophy and operational procedures. Their technology was indeed superior, but it followed predictable patterns that could be exploited by opponents who understood those patterns. The tide of battle shifted dramatically as human ships began scoring consistent hits on Saurian targets. Their kinetic weapons were less powerful than plasma cannons, but they fired much more rapidly and required no charging time between shots. Concentrated barrages could overwhelm even advanced defensive systems through sheer persistence. War Marshal Thexor found himself commanding a fleet that was slowly being dismantled by opponents who should have been helpless against his superior technology. All vessels reform defensive positions, he ordered desperately. Concentrate firepower and eliminate enemy ships systematically. But the Saurian fleet could not reform effectively because the human ships refused to cooperate with their tactical expectations. Every attempt to establish firing solutions was frustrated by constant movement and unpredictable targeting choices. The humans seemed to know exactly where Saurian weapons would fire before the shots were taken. Captain Nam Soo-jin had studied every aspect of Saurian military doctrine during the months since first contact. The Great Council chamber remained silent for nearly 10 minutes after the tactical displays confirmed the impossible outcome of the military exercise. Representatives from dozens of species stared at the data showing 12 human vessels victorious, over 50 advanced Saurian warships. The mathematics of the situation made no sense according to everything they thought they understood about military power and technological superiority. High Chancellor Vextar finally broke the silence with a voice that shook with barely controlled rage. This exercise proves nothing except that humans are capable of trickery and deception rather than honest warfare. Park Dae-ho looked up from his simple folding chair with the same calm expression he had maintained throughout the proceedings. With respect, High Chancellor, the exercise was conducted under conditions agreed upon by both sides with neutral observers from multiple species. The results speak for themselves. War Marshal Thexor had returned to the station with his pride shattered and his fleet in ruins. Half his ships required extensive repairs while the other half had been completely disabled by weapons he still did not fully understand. The humans had achieved victory through methods that contradicted every principle of conventional warfare. How? He demanded while staring at the small human diplomat. Our weapons are more powerful, our ships are larger, our technology is superior in every measurable way. How did your primitive fleet defeat forces that have conquered hundreds of worlds? Kim Min-ho stood up from his folding chair and walked to the center of the chamber where everyone could see him clearly. The device he had been adjusting throughout their stay on the station now revealed its true nature as holographic displays materialized around him, showing detailed technical analysis of every ship and weapon system in the Saurian fleet. Your technology is indeed superior in terms of raw power and individual capability, he said while highlighting specific data points. However, superior technology becomes useless when deployed according to predictable patterns against opponents who understand those patterns. The holographic displays showed Saurian tactical doctrines, weapon cycling times, shield harmonics, and command structures in perfect detail. Every aspect of their military capabilities had been analyzed and cataloged during what they thought were casual conversations and innocent observations. Admiral Cricksmell stared at the displays with growing horror. You have been spying on us from the moment you arrived. We have been observing and learning, Lee So-min corrected. Every species we encountered was eager to demonstrate their capabilities and explain their superior technology. We simply listened, carefully and analyzed what we learned. Dr. Yang Ji-hoon's holographic image appeared in the chamber as Earth's secure communication systems connected to the diplomatic gathering. The elderly scientist looked around at the assembled delegates with an expression of grave concern before beginning his presentation. The information we are about to share will be difficult for many of you to accept, he said, while additional displays materialized showing ancient star charts and archaeological evidence. However, the survival of all galactic civilization depends on your understanding what humanity has discovered. The chamber filled with images of dead worlds and extinct civilizations scattered throughout the galaxy, far beyond the small region, currently occupied by surviving species. Translated fragments of ancient warnings appeared alongside technical analysis of ruins that showed technology far more advanced than anything possessed by current galactic powers. "Your civilizations are not the pinnacle of galactic development," Dr. Yang Ji-hoon explained patiently. "You are the survivors of a much larger and more advanced galactic community that was systematically destroyed by something called the Devourers Shocked." Whispers and clicking sounds filled the chamber as delegates struggled to comprehend the implications of what they were seeing. The evidence was overwhelming, but it contradicted everything they believed about their own history and superiority. High Chancellor Vextar's scales darkened with anger and disbelief. "These are fabrications designed to undermine our authority. Humans seeking to justify their impossible military victory with fantasies about ancient threats." Yoon Hai-ri's image joined the presentation from Earth's Xenoarchaeology Institute. "The evidence comes from ruins found throughout human space, but similar sites exist in your own territories. Your ancestors left records of the same catastrophic events, but you have forgotten how to read them." Additional displays showed archaeological sites within Saurian territory that had been dismissed as unimportant or too damaged to provide useful information. When analyzed using human techniques, they revealed the same desperate warnings about approaching doom that had been found throughout the galaxy. "The pattern is unmistakable once you know how to look for it," Yoon Hai-ri continued. "Hundreds of advanced civilizations destroyed systematically over thousands of years. The survivors scattered to remote regions and forgot their own history to avoid attracting attention." Choi Jin-woo's voice joined the presentation with the latest intelligence reports from Earth's deep space monitoring stations. "The threat is still active and appears to be approaching the inhabited zone of the galaxy. Based on current movement patterns, contact is expected within 50 to 100 years. The council chamber erupted in panicked discussions as the full scope of the revelation became clear. Every species present suddenly understood that their conflicts over territory and dominance were meaningless compared to the existential threat approaching from beyond the galactic rim. War Marshal Texor studied the ancient warnings with his military experience and felt cold dread spreading through his consciousness. If these records are accurate, then conventional military resistance is useless against the Devourers. Every species that tried to fight them was completely destroyed. "Exactly," Park Dae-ho said while standing up from his chair. "Which is why the current approach to galactic civilization is fundamentally flawed. Hiding in a small corner of the galaxy and fighting amongst ourselves will not provide protection against what is coming." Kim Min-ho activated additional functions in his portable chair that revealed its true capabilities as a mobile command center. "The device I have been using throughout our stay here contains more processing power than most starships. Humanity approaches technology development differently than other species we have encountered. The technical specifications that appeared on the displays showed computing and analytical capabilities that exceeded even advanced Saurian systems, despite being contained in something small enough for one person to carry easily. The implications were staggering for species that equated size with power and capability. Your defeat in the military exercise was not achieved through superior weapons or larger ships." Captain Nam Soo-jin's voice joined the discussion from the human flagship. "We won because we observed, analyzed, and adapted to your tactics in real time, while you continued following predictable patterns." Lee So-min walked to stand beside her diplomatic colleagues while addressing the stunned assembly. "Humanity offers an alternative to both the failed strategy of hiding and the equally useless approach of trying to fight the Devourers with conventional weapons." "What alternative?" High Chancellor Vextar asked with his voice barely above a whisper. "Ambassador, Lee Dongmin's holographic image appeared from Earth's highest levels of government. Cooperation between all galactic species to understand the Devourers well enough to find an actual solution, rather than temporary avoidance. Every civilization must contribute their knowledge and capabilities to a unified effort." The concept was so revolutionary that many delegates could barely comprehend it. Species that had fought for centuries over minor territorial disputes being asked to work together against a threat that might not arrive for decades. Who would lead such an unprecedented alliance? Asked a Chitauri representative in clicking tones of nervous curiosity. Park Dae-ho looked around the chamber at representatives from species that had dismissed humanity as primitive and weak just hours earlier. The species best equipped to analyze complex problems, adapt to changing circumstances, and coordinate diverse capabilities toward common goals. The implication was clear, but stating it directly would have been politically impossible. Instead, he simply walked over to the massive chair reserved for the High Chancellor and gestured toward it respectfully. High Chancellor, would you be willing to step down from leadership of the Galactic Council to serve under a species you considered primitive just this morning? Vextar stared at the chair he had occupied for over 50 years, while his mind struggled with concepts that challenged every assumption about natural order and galactic hierarchy. His species had ruled through intimidation and superior firepower, but those advantages meant nothing against threats that had destroyed civilizations far more powerful than his own. The Saurian Empire has maintained galactic peace for centuries, he said weakly. The Saurian Empire has maintained control over a small region containing the survivors of galactic civilization. Kim Min-ho corrected gently. Peace achieved through fear is not the same as security achieved through preparation. War Marshal Thexor looked at the tactical analysis of his fleet's defeat and understood that everything he thought he knew about warfare had